So, how did I get here? The point of watching a rabbit through a window as it was digging a hole in my raised container. Well, the journey has been a long one, and it certainly didn't happen overnight. But let's back up for a bit and see what eventually got me to this point. So, I've been around rabbits for most of my life in some form, whether wildlife or as pets or even as food, and is absolutely aware of their tendency to dig, and they could jump and, uh, of course, would eat almost anything. But I underestimated so much. And there is only so much one can learn from observing from a distance and having pets. Moving to a new space, I was more than anxious to jump in and start planting. The landscape was almost a blank slate, and desert cottontails are native to Arizona and free roaming in the new area that I had just moved to almost 6 years ago. And I observed them but didn't think too much of it, figuring it wouldn't be too difficult to grow items and keep them away from plants. But I vastly underestimated their ability to get to plants and certainly their determination. Initially, I just tried to plant things in certain containers and really did not expect for them to jump into the containers. Didn't seem to matter the height. They would find a way to either climb or jump or sort of stair step their way into the container they wanted to be in. And sometimes it wasn't even to actually eat anything, it was just to dig. Other times they would jump over fencing that I had thought was tall enough. I'd even gone as far as to think that I could somehow keep them out of the backyard entirely, which was more than ambitious on my part. And while it worked for a little while, it proved to be pointless and honestly was making things more difficult for some of the quail that would end up having their babies getting a little lost and finding difficulty getting out. So I ended up scrapping all of those things and went back to the fundamental observation. What is it that they want? Well, they obviously want food. They want greenery most of the time, but they also like to eat dried leaves and other things that help keep their, shall we say, their diet balanced. Was there something I could do to find that sweet spot that they could have some items, they could maybe munch on some dried leaves and other things that I didn't care about. Maybe even I could allow some weeds, or what I call weeds, plants that I didn't care about, to grow, that they would eat, and get other plants established to the point that having the rabbits nibble on them, graze on them, actually wasn't going to harm them once it got to a certain point. So I started observing more of what were the native plants around me that were doing just fine, not being fenced off, not having to worry about the rabbits that were roaming around the neighborhood, and started planting more of those, especially in the front yard. But even in the backyard, getting some of those established. So the mesquite, the desert willow, the tuberosa, which I already had one, but now is planting more of them. And a number of these plants I would fence off with the hardware cloth, which I found to be the only thing that would prevent the rabbits from getting to a plant. And then I would use the hardware cloth for other little sections, and just getting certain plants, sometimes annuals, sometimes perennials, but getting them established to the point that once they're large enough, I could take the fence off and either find the rabbits left it alone completely, or the rabbits could munch here and there, but it wasn't going to harm the plant any. And therefore I would still get what I'm wanting and needing. And the rabbits could actually start having a space, and the two of us were working together. Is this to say that everything's been perfect? Absolutely not. They continue to challenge me in ways I sometimes don't anticipate, which brings me back to looking out the window and filming and observing rather than immediately reacting to a rabbit digging in one of my raised containers that initially I thought was tall enough and had been protected enough. But again, getting another lesson. No, it wasn't. And sometimes observing other elements of not necessarily was the rabbit wanting to eat anything. In this case, no, just wanting to dig. Sometimes they're wanting to dig because they're wanting to create a little burrow to have young. So I start observing that, started noticing patterns. And can I create little habitats and spaces for them to do that will allow us to, again, cohabitate. And, at the end of the day, they belong here. So how can I grow the food and the items that I need, that I want, but still allow for them to have shaded spots, have protections, that they want to have their dust baths and be able to relax in the shade when it's extremely hot outside. So how do I balance both of those things? And I think through observation recognizing that they definitely belong here in the desert. And there are plenty of native plants that have managed to live alongside them and sometimes thrive because of them. And I need to learn more from that rather than trying to fight against it. Doesn't mean it's always perfect, and they continue to challenge me at various points, but it certainly has become a more mutual experience of living together in the garden. And I find that I can now enjoy seeing them roaming around, nibbling on some leaves, and enjoying the shade that I've created. And that we both can get something from the garden.